Hey everybody, welcome to Faded Folklore with your host Travis Nelson. But I also have my good friend Aaron Engel here as well.
Hi, pals.
You get to hear me explain a story from history while being faded. And by faded, I don't mean anything drug related. People
Just
think
kind
that.
of-
I just don't get a lot of sleep. My eyes are kind of red. I am going to be, this looks like beer. I poured out the beer and I put apple juice in here. So,
I'm eating candy.
yeah, Aaron's just eating candy.
So here's some crinkles throughout the show.
So she's going down to Candyland while I tell you guys about the Lady Franklin Bay Expedition, also called the Greely Expedition. I'm getting most of my sources from Wikipedia, but also this wonderful book on the topic called Ghosts of Cape Sabine. And the reason why this book rules is because they actually have all of their journals throughout the entire journey. So you can actually read all the shit everybody is talking about each other. And you'll notice that
Tabbies.
I put some tabs in there because I got some
job.
photos to show you as we go.
Okay, I won't spoil it.
Yeah. Or are you going to read the back cover of it?
This seems to me like a nightmare in one of Edgar Allan Poe's stories. I thought these were going to be reviews, but then I'm realizing they're from characters.
No, that's just crazy quotes from their diaries, which is what I was actually mentioning.
Ooh. Confound the man. Cannot he keep still and wait for the ice to move? Okay.
I listened to there's a couple YouTube videos out there. They didn't get into the diary stuff, which is why I decided to make this. I thought it would be unique to actually go through and talk about it. It'll be horrifying, by the way.
Oh no.
Oh yeah, no, you're fucking in for it.
Oh no, it's going to be a scary story.
No, it's not a good one. I mean, it is literally 99% fluff. And then that last 1%, ooh, it's real bad. It's as bad as it gets.
Okay.
Yeah, are you ready?
I'm ready. Tell me all about it.
Okay.
First question is, Lady Franklin Bay. Is the Lady Franklin? Is the name of the bay Lady Franklin?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
No, it's not Franklin Bay, but like for girls.
No.
Okay.
No, they didn't gender a bay.
Okay.
Yeah. So the Lady Franklin Bay Expedition, like I said, also called the Greely Edition, after its commander, Lieutenant Adolphus Greely. Greely, you want to see what he looks like?
Yeah.
Ooh, this is Greely right here.
Ooh,
That's Greely.
kind of hot.
Kind of hot? Yeah. Looks like Branson Reese a little bit. You know who Branson Reese is?
Not a clue.
Well, someone will. Lieutenant Adolphus Greely. Yeah, so he's a lieutenant.
Okay.
Don't actually have a strong understanding of military rank.
Ship rankings.
Nope. I know how to say corporal and colonel, though.
Not colonel.
Yeah, people think it's colonel, and it's
Nobody
really
thinks
funny
that.
when they make that mistake. I won't be making that mistake.
Not a fool. A damned fool.
No, not
Really?
today. All right.
Okay.
So,
Greely smoking hot.
So I'm just going to do a little bit of forward. Like, Greely had been on an extended furlough in Europe when he first experienced the fervor of the race to the Arctic. So this was in the 19th century. And in the 19th century, it became really popular to, like, go on adventures. There was a lot of that kind of thing going on. I'll talk about it again later on, but, like, you know, clearly like a lot of like horrible shit in colonizing, but like that wasn't what they called it. It was just like if you had rich parents, you got to go off and adventure, and then that's how they became like the influencers of their age. They were just socially,
resonates.
yeah, they were popular. They had social capital. People would then pay them to go on more adventures.
And probably come to their parties and talk about their stuff.
Yeah, and the press would go crazy about
Yeah.
them. So it was like that was what the thing to do back then.
Okay.
And at a certain point, people started, instead of just kind of like exploring things more near the equator, I guess, people started making these polar expeditions, which is like fucking crazy town. Why the fuck? Like, they didn't have, you know, this is in the 1900s, so they didn't, or 1800s in the 19th century, so they didn't have like that advanced of like equipment or anything.
This is like a wooden ship and stuff.
Yeah. They're basically just kind of like trying to copy whatever they see like indigenous people doing, but also being very racist
Sure.
Yeah, and pretending like they aren't smart enough to.
Yeah.
That's like a constant theme in here. I didn't really write a bunch of it into this, but like if you're reading a lot of the notes, there is a lot of just like.
Just totally racist against these people, but then also like clearly they have figured out something that is beyond your comprehension.
Yeah, like they're dying because they have to live where these people have figured out to live, but they're still very condescending to them. People were like very stupid clearly back then because they're still stupid now, so why would they be smarter back then? They thought that like somehow beyond the frozen ice of the Arctic Circle might be like an oasis or an open sea that would allow shipping lanes between the like Atlantic and the Pacific, the kind of like Northwest Passage idea.
Sure.
But there was also a lot of like bonkos crazy shit, like conspiracy theories and like big ideas of like, oh, there'll be races of people living at the North Pole, and maybe there'll be like an open sea with a bunch of vegetation and like new types of like they just basically anything.
Crops.
Yeah, ice elemental people. That's what they. I mean, really, anything you could think up, like newspapers were printing it. So any crazy idea you had, what could be at the North Pole.
Okay.
And so the UK mostly, it was like Russia, the UK were sending people north to try to like learn about it because it was so uninhabitable. Like people weren't going there. So they were going up there. They were learning all kinds of crazy stuff. They were getting weather data, but also finding new plant species, new animals. And the United States had done none of this, right?
Sure.
But this is the story basically of the United States trying to do it and failing in kind of succeeding, but mostly
Spectacularly failing.
Yeah, it wasn't a failure of like they did what they set out to do, but the government completely let them down. Is what I'm saying. And there's a lot of assholes in this. There's a lot of like
There's a lot of boys, I'm betting.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean there was some women in, but I wrote them out.
Boys in that.
I wrote the women out. I was like, what?
Thank you.
Yeah, I was like, they just slow the story down.
Absolutely.
Greely was born March 27th, 1844 in Massachusetts.
I don't care.
He was the son of a twice married shoemaker. Nothing.
Shoemaker dad or shoemaker mom?
His dad was a shoemaker.
Cool.
Yeah. He had a stepbrother 20 years older than him, so he wished to make his way out of his brother's shadow, and he joined the Union Army in 1861.
Okay.
Yeah. So he saw action at Ball's Bluff.
Oh, don't we all?
Yeah. Fair Oak, Savage Station, and was wounded twice at Antietam. And I don't understand what that means, like wounded twice necessarily.
Oh, yeah.
I assume he was shot and stabbed, but those had to happen like pretty close together. So it's like, I don't know, it's weird to say he was injured twice. It feels like he was just injured once.
Well, he was like put me back in. He got injured.
Yeah, I'm just hoping like he didn't get shot and carried back to a medical tent and then someone ran up and stabbed him when he was... But anyways, he recovered. He was commissioned second lieutenant of the 81st Colored Infantry in Louisiana. His father got sick, so he like submitted
was he... but he was a white guy.
He was a white guy.
But he was in charge of a black unit?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So this is actually like there wasn't a lot of information on this, but from what there was, he seemed like he was probably a pretty cool dude given the situation because he ran this. They called it a colored infantry, and then he was down there, and he even like advocated for them and sent letters to Lincoln and like to different people trying to get more supplies for his troops because they were just being treated racistly, so they weren't getting
class,
they weren't getting the supplies they needed. So there's some positive stuff about him there. His dad got sick, and he tried to leave so he could go see his sick dad. And he was like, I've been working 3 years, and I've only been home for 12 days. And they released him the following fall, so he got home just in time to hear that his father already died.
It's a very Little Women situation.
Yeah. I don't know Little Women that good.
You should watch one of the 17 remakes of the film. They're all great and star-studded.
Oh, boy.
Okay, carry on. No, have some of that. Have some of your Wawa.
Okay.
Okay, so they wouldn't let him go. And then he missed his dad's last days.
Yeah, he got there, and they're like, your dad's dead.
So, rough.
So then he tried to leave again in 1865, but failed. And I don't understand what they mean by he failed. Like, I don't know if they were just like, no, you can't quit, or he just decided to stop trying. Yeah, then he tried to settle down, but he couldn't in post-war Louisiana because he was from the north, so he was labeled a carpetbagger. Now, this is something I didn't know.
I don't know what that is.
Yeah, someone from the north, carpetbagger is someone from the northern states who went to the south after the Civil War to profit from the Reconstruction. And
You nailed it.
yeah, and then a scalawag.
Also, a political candidate who seeks election in an area where they have no local connections.
Yeah.
Carpetbagger.
Yep. Let's think of one real quick. Dr. Oz. That was easy. Scalawag is a person, a white Southerner, who collaborated with Northern Republicans during Reconstruction, often for personal profit.
Okay.
Okay, so carpetbagger means they went down to do it, and then scalawag means they already lived there, but
Yeah.
they were,
They're like, oh sure, yeah, I can be on the winning team now.
Yeah, I didn't
Yeah.
realize that scalawag had like that
I thought it was a
connotation to
pirate
it.
term.
Me too. I thought it was like, arr,
Yeah.
shiver me timbers, scalawag, you know?
Always did.
Yeah, well, we're already learning.
So he did not find a home for himself in Narlands.
Mhm.
Okay.
No Orleans.
What do you say?
No living herelands.
Narlands.
Yeah. They said New Orleans. He joined like the Signal Corps, which back then that was the part of the army that they were in charge of like weather and information and telegraphs and building telegraph lines around the United States. So they taught him like telegraphy, and he was just really good at it for some reason. Like that was really like something he figured out. So they sent him west, and he was just crazy efficient at putting up these telephone lines. They asked him to build 1,100 more across Texas, and they gave him 3 years, and he finished it in 1 year.
Yeah. Greely?
Yeah, so Greely is like, and he had this whole system of getting people to like ship the things down via trains, like another way. Like he really was like the best at this. So this was him riding high in his career.
Okay.
But hold on to your butts,
My butts?
because here comes some girl trouble. Yeah,
Here's a woman.
yeah. Here you go. He destroyed most of the letters that would give us exact details, but there was one intact letter written to a Miss M. He said he loved her. She told him his love, quote, belongs to and this is amazing, Aaron, belongs to an illusion, really, to the woman whom you feel I ought to be. And of course, you are saddened and disappointed. My dear, learn to understand the difference between us. She, your illusion, is young in mind and soul.
Ooh.
The real woman has her youth aside forever, or rather, youth has deserted her.
Wow.
Is that not the hardest way you've ever heard someone say no?
Listen, I ain't no fucking spring chicken.
So-
Little Greely man.
I have a theory about this. They didn't go into detail,
I'd
and
love
like
it if you did.
obviously, I do have a theory about this
Okay.
because back then, if you got married like as a woman, like you didn't have rights. You know what I mean? Like your husband's rights were your rights, but if he died,
Yeah.
you got the money. But if you got remarried, that guy got the money, right?
Okay,
And
yeah.
you again didn't have rights. So like that was like this the weird sweet spot of like if you were like a widow, like guys were gonna try to marry you because they knew you had money. So I'm kind of think that's what happened here was like he fell in love with a woman, and she was just like, dude, no, like I really have this figured out. Like I have money, no one's in charge of me, I can do my thing.
Hell yeah.
But he got really upset about it. Very clearly, he did not understand what the situation was. Probably
He's like,
was,
what's an illusion?
yeah, he's like, you're older than me. I want to marry you. I'll do
Seems
anything.
fine.
And she's just like, no. And he's like, well, I hate myself. And he got a furlough overseas, and he just went to Europe, citing health reasons. And here I wrote in parentheses, i.e. dry dick.
Oh, he had dry dick.
Yeah. I wrote this drunk too. Europe had been enjoying colonialism since the 1500s, but at this time there's a craze. Oh, this is what I was saying earlier of adventures making history.
Okay.
And it was always like in the name of country and science, but it was always very chauvinistic and like very like celebrity kind of culture situation. And when they had the telegraph, that allowed the stories to be spread that much faster. So that's why it was like all of a sudden this whole thing. If you did something, yeah, everybody's hearing about it. And like news stories got so popular because it's like, he did what? Who did what? We didn't know people were doing things.
It's finding that ice crop vegetation up there.
Yeah.
Or like holding onto a rhino.
There's dragons in that North Pole. That's where the dragons have been. The most famous case of this was Dr. David Livingstone, who was a missionary who was presumed lost in Africa. So he went to Africa.
That's right.
Yeah, seriously, like some dummy. He was like, you know what? I'm gonna go tell everybody about Christ, and he disappeared. And then later, he got found by this guy named Morton Stanley, a reporter for the New York Herald, and he ran into him in the middle. Like the story is stupid. It's like fake. The story is that like he found him in the brush, and he was like, Dr. Livingston, I presume, and that was the big headline. But he probably just ran into him and was like, oh, you're that guy.
Yeah.
But anyways, that was like the popular thing, and then people started going north. And one of the people who started going north, and this is my favorite guy in the whole story, he was an Austro-Hungarian named Karl Wayprickt. He believed that men were often motivated by chauvinism, commercial gain, personal glory, and they should instead seek scientific truth.
You would like that guy.
Yes. So Wayprickt was one of the first to try to venture north, but was soon followed by many adventurers who all left a mark one way or another. In 1845, Captain Sir John Franklin set out with 129 officers and men, the largest expedition yet, and it vanished, creating a Victorian exploration mystery that resonated deeply in the public consciousness.
Okay.
The goal of polar exploration quickly changed to finding the Franklin expedition, and more than 40 parties left in search, many of them financed by Lady Jane Franklin.
Lady Jane?
Yeah.
Okay, hold on. When you are a sir and a captain, is it Captain Sir or Sir Captain?
Oh, hang on, I wrote it here somewhere.
You wrote Captain Sir John Franklin?
Captain Sir, yeah. I saw it written Captain Sir John Franklin. So at about the same time, Karl Wayprickt was forming this international plan to establish a circle of scientific stations around the North Pole in different countries. So, he's like way ahead of the times. He's like, we're a bunch of countries, let's get together. Let's figure out what's up there. Let's, explore. If we all work together, we can explore the North Pole. And if we just stop, being these egocentric explorers.
Chauvinists.
Yeah, we can, if we just work together, we can actually make some progress. Oh, fuck, now I lost my spot.
He contacted the head of the U.S. Army Signal Corps.
He contacted the head of the U.S. Army Signal Corps. I will keep you in, actually, when I edit this. You saying that. Albert Meyer, who fell ill and appointed a man named William Henry Howgate as the Signal Corps Property and Disbursement Officer. Here's a picture of Howgate.
Howgate.
You can tell he's a motherfucker, right?
Yeah, deep mustache.
Look at that hair.
And in this, the caption it says "before the scandal."
Yeah. Oh yeah.
What's a scandal?
No. Yeah, we're getting there.
Okay.
Yeah. So, as Karl Wayprickt was trying to put together this national everybody works together thing, the chief signal officer of the United States, who's the guy who he was working with, got sick. And so he was just like, I need a replacement. This guy can do it. Henry Howgate steps in. And Howgate was fucking pumped about Arctic exploration because he was a big time idiot. And he thought there'd be an oasis up there and uncontacted peoples and stuff like that. This guy, he's a real shithead. He's the big time shithead in this story that there's going to be a lot of rough stuff that happens to the rest of these guys, and it's easy to get upset about things that are happening and guys who are doing these things, but it's important to remember that it's all this guy's fault, Henry Howgate.
Okay.
Yeah. So Howgate was just he got randomly promoted to the very top. He's the top dog. He's kind of in charge of everything. The New York Herald picked up on Howgate's plan to involve the U.S. with Karl Wayprickt's plan and establish a scientific station at Lady Franklin Bay under the Army Signal Corps.
And Lady Franklin Bay is in the North American continent.
Here, I'll show you where it is.
Maps.
So Lady Franklin Bay. So here's Newfoundland. Here's Canada. If you go up to Greenland,
Okay.
yeah, Lady Franklin Bay is right there. So it's
it's
all
on
the way
Greenland.
up there. Yeah.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah. So.
Checking for
Do you want to read it to me?
I just want to keep track for you.
Thank you. Back from Europe, Adolphus Greely had a high profile because of all the telegraph wires he put up.
He was talking about himself on there. Was like,
no, other people were talking about him.
Really, baby.
They're like, this guy got it done in 1 year. We thought it would take 3.
Okay.
And so he just basically went off to Europe to be sad about a girl, and then
Right.
came back, and everyone was like, hey, we still think you rule.
The smoke show from
Yeah.
the Telegraph Company.
You got all sad and left, but we all thought you were cool, so you should have stayed. And Howgate, who had, like, at that point, he'd just been appointed.
And he's in his old job, right?
No. Greely was out in Texas setting up these telegraph wires.
He
The
wasn't
chief
in
signal
charge.
officer, yeah, he's the very head of the Signal Corps.
Okay.
And so Howgate basically became the head of the Signal Corps because this other guy got sick. So he just took over, and Greely got back, and he was like, you rule. I love what you did with the telegraph wires. I think you should go to the Arctic. And that's a really stupid thing because he had no experience. He'd never been out on the ocean. He'd never been in the Arctic. He had none of those skills, but he had been out. But, you know, Howgate was just gassing him up like, you're the guy. Howgate very much had that, like, dumb guy confidence. He was married but openly cheating on his wife with a mistress who would throw lavish Washington, D.C. house parties that she couldn't afford. And they would embezzle money from the Signal Corps through Howgate. Yeah, so Howgate was just taking money from the Signal Corps, gassing up Greely, and then taking his money to spend on his mistress. Listen to this asshole. He bought her a house 2 blocks away from where he lived with his wife and daughter, so he could just walk there.
That's how you get your house burnt down.
Yeah. And so the guy who's actually the boss is in the hospital. So Howgate just had full reign over the Signal Corps expenses, and he embezzled, I think, $200,000, over half of which he was said to have spent on prostitutes. Which I don't know how they, like, figured that out.
Yeah.
I don't know if they just, like, twisted his ear. And he was like, all right, $50,000 on prostitutes.
Okay, 100.
But that's the number that was said. He was given $50,000 for the expedition he was setting up with Greely, but he definitely spent some of it on mistresses. So I think they only wound up getting like $25,000 to set up this whole expedition.
So he wasn't embezzling money for the mission.
No. He was embezzling money from the mission. He was sending these guys to the Arctic and taking money from them.
Yeah. It's like, you can do it with 50.
Yeah.
You can do it with 40.
He's like, look, guys, get back here. Sex parties. Like, just such a shithead. And despite political opposition, Howgate seemed to assure everybody that the expedition was on and had sent a scouting mission ahead to procure men and supplies.
He assured people of that, or it had happened?
Well, he kind of did it.
Okay.
And that's a lot of this was like just a lot of miscommunication and people thinking that more was actually done than actually happened. So he said he sent up an exploratory, like, scouting mission. He was shot down in Congress but appealed, and in 1880 he asked for funds to build a temporary scientific outpost at Lady Franklin Bay.
Okay.
At this point, Greely was married, had a daughter, but he jumped at the chance to lead the expedition, even though he had no Arctic experience.
Just a telegraph
Just
man.
because Howgate really gassed him up, and probably, like, you know, he thought Howgate was a bigger deal than he actually was.
Yeah.
He asked Frederick Kislingbury.
Kislingbury.
Remember him from the jacket?
Yeah.
Yeah. He also had no Arctic experience, and he asked him to come along because they had worked together, like, in Texas. Like, that guy was his second when he was putting up all the telegraph wires. So he's like, I don't know about the Arctic, but I know about telegraph wires.
And I know about Kingsley.
Yep, Kislingbury. So Kislingbury had a wife. This is crazy, by the way, and this is one of the main, like, big characters. So here's his introduction. Kislingbury had kids and a wife, but just prior to Greely reaching out, his wife actually passed away in April 1878. Kislingbury took 2 months compassionate leave to Detroit, where he heard about the projected Arctic expedition, and he was writing to them, and he said, "This is my reason for wanting to go. I'd lost my first wife." Okay. Right? Unfortunately, by the time he had written those words, he lost his second wife as well.
Oh, gosh.
Yeah, in early 1879, he married his dead wife, Agnes's sister, Jessie.
That seems odd.
Yeah,
Probably
real
happened
quick.
A lot back there.
Real quick, that was like, within a year.
Mm-hmm. She's like, "You mind if I tap in?"
Yeah. In May 1879, she also died of disease. I think it was scarlet fever.
Okay.
An outbreak of scarlet fever also threatened the lives of his young boys. Oddly, Kislingbury wrote back that he was grateful and wanted to undertake the expedition, even though that would mean leaving his two sons that had lost a mother,
these children.
an aunt, a stepmother in the middle of... Like, he's just leaving his sons in a weird fort in the middle of, like, a scarlet fever outbreak. And
I don't think dads dadded too hard back then.
But here's the thing. I'm spoiler alert, he spends this entire mission writing letters to his sons.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, to the point where he gets fired because he's not doing his job.
All right.
He's just writing letters to his sons.
Okay.
He's kind of... It's hard to, like he went through so much so fast, it's hard to, really blame him for anything. And especially, he probably just didn't know how to process everything that had just happened to him. So he, was running away, basically, from his life to... Yeah. So, I'll go be in the Arctic for, 3 years.
A while.
I mean,
3 years was the plan?
So the plan was, in 1881, they were going to leave, and then they would get resupplied in 1882, and then picked up in 1883. But...
You got different notes over there?
Yeah, I got notes scattered. I don't know if you see all this.
These are also notes?
Secret notes. This is just a smoke screen.
There's a computer screen, guys.
Well, smoky computer screen. Okay.
Would you marry your dead wife's sister?
No! It's such a weird thing to do.
Seems kind of weird.
It's so weird. I mean, we just talked about the blue fugates the other day, so it's I guess that was kind of happening, but still, to just bounce.
It was their own sister, not their wife's sister.
Yeah, in the first, Agnes had 4 kids, and within a year he married her sister, so one of those kids were what the hell? Yeah. And then she died too, by the way, that's not really in the rest of this, but I know what happened to his kids because he was constantly writing about them but never got a letter back to them. They were having a tough time. So 2 of them got sent to Detroit, and then they escaped to Rochester, New York.
Were they in prison?
I don't understand why it was escaped, but they escaped, and then the third was left with some army hero guy who wound up killing himself. Oh. Yeah, so then the third had to go find his brothers, and I think he wound up in Ontario.
Jeez, oh Pete.
Is that a lot? All right, here we go.
They're just boys. You ought not talk that way. They're just boys.
Ain't never done that to me, just a boy. It's just a little sling blade.
Just for the fans.
Mm-hmm. Deep cut fans. Okay.
So we've got Kislingbury, we've got Greely. Is Howgate on the trip or no? He just
no.
Okay.
Howgate is pretty quickly on the run after they take off. So he actually goes on the lam and, is running for pretty much, I think maybe almost this entire thing, he's on the lam. So he sets them up to fail and then immediately runs away.
Good for him.
Yeah.
World-class coward.
Yeah. So they had a lot of trouble outfitting the expedition, most likely due to lack of Arctic experience in the group. A lot of the scientific equipment they bought had arrived broken or in disrepair, and they were unable to find men with Arctic experience, and there weren't many boats outfitted to sail through ice fields. It would take too long for me to explain how many things went wrong in this story because of inadequate or bad equipment and supplies. So I'm just going to move on. At the end of July 1881, they sailed to Upper Navik from St. John's Harbor to pick up the last of their supplies, and Jens Edward and Thorlip Christensen. So Jens Edward, they call him an Eskimo, in all the documents or whatever. But him and Thorlip Christensen were just native to Greenland.
Okay.
None of the men had any sailing experience except for this really drunk guy named Sergeant William Cross, who's like another one of my favorite characters because he is such a shithead. He goes on this expedition and like he knows they're all doomed, so he spends the entire time getting as drunk as possible.
Oh gosh.
Oh, it's amazing.
Why would he accept it if he knew they were doomed?
I think he might have like kind of had to.
Okay.
They just a lot of this guy's background information isn't like super clear, but it's basically like seemed like do you want to go on this expedition? It was kind of seemed like this thing where like it was pumped up to be like this like big like whole thing.
They were going to set up this station, right?
Yeah, and then as they like came together, it was kind of a fire festival situation where it just really there wasn't the infrastructure. Yeah, so this guy responded because he got there and realized he knew more than anyone else about. He's like, I'm the only one.
That's a bad situation when I know the most.
He's like, I'm the only one who can captain a boat.
William Cross is the man that knows most about it. I know you're in a sorry situation.
Yeah. I'm just gonna need you to assume he's shit-faced this whole time.
Done.
Like, there's a couple times I'll be like, okay, now he started drinking the lamp fluid, but I just need you to assume he's always drunk.
Okay.
And because that's nonstop in all of their diaries. They're like, so Sergeant Cross is really drunk again. And at one point, there's these cats. I'm not going to talk about it because it's just in the details. But at one point, he's captaining the boat like as it's sinking, and he's drunk as shit, and he like falls off the boat, and someone has to go save him. It's amazing. He's
gorgeous.
A great character. At this point, their trip up to St. John, which is Newfoundland, right on the way up in Canada. So they would just that trip, though up to there. They got so seasick. Greely couldn't make it up to the deck, and
Greely's the captain of this ship. For
yeah,
some reason.
he's
okay.
Well, there is a captain to the ship, but he's the
expedition.
Yeah, he's the captain of he's the head of the expedition.
Okay.
And then Sergeant Brainerd wrote, "Our sleeping apartments are deluged, possessions floating in the flood." And he noted that 4 of his comrades were ready to give up the ghost. Oh. So they hadn't even made it to Canada, and they were already wrecked.
Wow.
It gets so much worse. So Kislingbury at this point penned a letter to a friend where he wrote, "How I miss my boys. Is there a man making more sacrifice than I?" And adding, "But I must not think of this until the end is gained." So this guy's bonkers at this point. He's just writing, like he doesn't know where he is, I don't think. I think he's overcome with grief. So he was also being an asshole, though, to everyone.
Kislingbury?
Yeah, at one point he just sent his rifle to the men's quarters commanding that they cleaned it, and no one did. And many of the men signed, they were like, well, I signed on to be a part of an exploration, and I don't need like these random officers I don't know demanding I like perform their own menial work.
Yeah.
So one evening Greely ordered that the men undergo a physical examination, so they made them just walk out on the deck, and Greely had Kislingbury do the examination instead of the group physician, a guy named Dr. Pavey.
Okay.
And that pissed everyone off.
They touching balls and whatnot.
Yeah, like you just another guy with no doctor experience is just looking at your bodies and telling you what's wrong with them.
You fat? You ugly? You got weird ass teeth?
I don't like this mole here. Began doubting Greely's commanding ability after they came across a cache of goods left by a British expedition. So apparently at this point, all over the place, different expeditions had just left caches of like goods for people who were needing it.
Okay.
So they found one, and he chose not to take one of their whaleboats because he would have felt guilty about it. And then all these guys are like, "No, dude, that's what this stuff is for."
Mm-hmm.
And there was further conflict between Dr. Pavey, who was the physician, and a man named Henry Clay. So they were those were the guys that Howgate sent ahead, and he sent them up to Upper Navik to prepare, and they were stuck for a winter together, and they wound up moving to separate sides of the island. They hated each other so much. Pavey refused to stay with the expedition if Clay did. Greely wrote, "If he was anything but a doctor, I would deal with him summarily." I guess that's like fancy talk for I would slap him. Clay left for home on the ship along with a couple other soldiers. So there's already guys getting sent back. One was sent back for being subversive, which could have been anything. And the other had epilepsy, which is like a very real, like, why are you trying to go to the Arctic with epilepsy? That wasn't good.
Maybe just found out.
Yeah. So Dr. Pavey, the physician, was an asshole, and he let everyone know it.
I thought I just assumed he was going to be like the good guy in this.
No, he's a big dork too. That's the thing, is they're all such assholes. He found it clear that he knew more about the Arctic than the rest of them could ever learn.
Because he'd been before?
No,
Okay.
he also did not have much polar experience.
Oh, okay.
He was from New Orleans. And he had studied the Arctic and made plans for an expedition with a French explorer, but the Franco-Prussian War intervened. They both fought in that war. His partner was killed. He traveled back to the States where he completed his medical training.
I guess I'll be a doctor.
In New Orleans, yeah,
Okay.
he's like, I guess. So Greely immediately got frustrated by Kislingbury, as he thought that Fred was spending too much time in his bunk writing letters to his boys, and not be required by his men at all times. So I don't think I wrote it here, but I'll elaborate.
I think this was Drunk Travis notes.
Yeah, this is Drunk Travis notes. I'll elaborate though. So what was happening was Kislingbury was just like, instead of getting up and like, they had a very regimented structure every day, and he would just lay in bed and write letters to his son.
My guy.
And they're all like, bro, you have work to do. And he'd be like, I'm writing letters to my boys.
I always wonder, how do letters get from a ship to a place?
Well, that's the thing. They're not mailing them. They keep all of the letters. And by the end of the story, they have a 50-pound box of letters and things written that they were never able to send out.
Okay. Because you'd have to get to a place that had post or something. Gotcha.
So by this time, Howgate was wanted for embezzling and on the run, right? So this is the point where Howgate is no longer in control of anything, and he's running from the cops. So Greely was instead forced to contact the new Signal Corps leader, General Hazen. So this guy got promoted because of all the bullshit that was happening. And so Greely got a hold of him with instructions for them to be relieved and resupplied. Okay. So this is the point where Greely said, this is the things we need, and this is where we need it, and this is when we need it. The big problem that we're going to have in this story is 1881, when they left for this, was an unseasonably warm year, and the following years are much colder. So in this trip up, they were able to get through pretty easily, even though they struggled, because there wasn't as much ice, and that's going to really play a factor in the future of this. Yeah, it's like Lady Franklin Bay. So they finally got to Lady Franklin Bay, and they built like a wooden building, and they christened it Fort Conger after a Michigan senator that helped fund the expedition. Fort Conger's still there. You can go check it out.
I won't.
No, don't. I'll explain why later. Kislingbury wrote letters until his arm ached, is what he said.
Wow.
And Greely noted that he rose to breakfast very late and went to bed until dinner. His other officer, Lockwood, was an insomniac, so he slept in too. So they're just not doing what they're supposed to be doing.
Yeah.
And things came to a head when Greely got into an argument with Kislingbury about his sleeping in and his general laziness. And Kislingbury said officers shouldn't have to wake up with the men. And then Greely just flipped out on him. And Kislingbury got upset, and he went back to his bed, and he wrote a letter to Greely asking to be relieved from duty. And Greely was extra pissed because he spent like half a day writing that letter. And like they just got there. Like the ship that they came on hasn't left yet. They just got there. And they all agreed that Kislingbury should leave. So they gave him all the letters to take home, and he tried to make it back to the ship, but he didn't make it. The ship had taken off. So now, Fred Kislingbury
is fired, but still present.
He gets to spend 3 years in the Arctic on accident.
Missed a boat. Oh no!
Yeah, he big time goofed it.
No.
So the men kept on like almost dying on trips out exploring. Like they were really having fun going out, and like they had sledges and they had dogs and dog sleds, and they were making their way around and trying to make it as far north as possible, and a few of them did.
Okay.
But yeah, they kept almost dying, and then someone accidentally burned down one of their tents. And so like first thing, Greely went out with like 4 guys, and then he fell down and hurt his knee, and he had to like go back, and they were like, like they were all so mad. He just made them go off on their own. And then Greely just kept like getting mad at everything Gislingbur did. Like he'd be playing cards and he'd be like, "God damn you, piece of shit!" And anytime he saw him like fraternizing with the men, he would just flip out on him. And then winter came and they all started going crazy because it's the Arctic, so it's dark all the time.
Oh yeah.
And none of them knew how to handle it, and so guys would just like wander off in the middle of the night. Like Jens Edward wandered off one time, Gislingbur wandered off and came back. And Greely flipped out on him, and he was like, "I was just out for a walk." And he was like, "You can't just wander off into the dark in the Arctic. Like, it's not." So they weren't doing well. And this was the first winter, right? They're supposed to get a relief ship the first year, but it encountered too much ice, and it just turned back.
Oh.
Right. The second year, because in over time, they'd been like, finding game and killing kind of like musk oxen.
Possibly.
Yeah, there's like some like game and stuff they can kill up there.
Okay.
And they're making it work. It's not great. They're running low on supplies, but they had a lot of supplies. Mm-hmm. So they were like, they're supposed to be able to make it like 2 or 3 years from the supplies they had. So they weren't really worried about it after the first year. The second year, they sent 2 relief ships up. One of them, which is the Proteus, the ship they went up on the first time, it sank with all of the supplies.
Oh, jeez.
Yeah, they got some supplies off, but most of it all sank. And the other one saved them, but it couldn't go any further because of the ice. Okay. Because that first year was swarm, right? Yeah. And now they're like, oh wow, there's just so much ice we can't get to these guys. So Greely, after the second relief ship, like the second resupply didn't happen, he decided they needed to start making their way south with 40 days rations. Okay. And he was hoping they could get far enough to get past the ice and run into like a relief ship, somebody who could help them.
Sleds and foot?
No, they actually had like a little steamboat. So they needed, by the way, Sergeant Cross. He was the only one who knew how to. yeah, a real Steamboat Willie situation. Very drunk. So at this point, they were like running low on a lot of like supplies they thought they would have. Like they didn't have a lot of shoes. There was 25 guys, and there was 11 pairs of boots and 6 pairs of moccasins, right? And the group had spent a total of 721 days at Fort Conger at that point. Okay. Right, so I really jumped ahead. They were there for
2 years.
yeah, and they did manage to make it farther north than any other expedition. Okay. So at this point, I'm going to show you the path of their retreat, and I'm going to just kind of keep this open so you can see it. Yeah.
Oh, I see a Greely Fjord up here.
Yeah, there's a lot of like people died here markers too. So don't look at those spoilers. Sergeant Cross piloted their steam launch. That steam launch is what they called the steamship. Okay. They named it the Lady Greely after Greely's wife, who at this point was like she rode for her husband. Like she was actually the reason why. Eventually, what happened was when the second ships went up and one of them sank, everyone in the press made a big deal about what a big fuck up it was, and so to cover their asses, there was an indictment. There was a court of inquiry put on for basically the top guys at the Signal Corps, and they basically just got busy blaming each other for what was happening. And then at a certain point, his wife stepped up and like she actually got like popular support behind sending them help, and that's ultimately the way they get saved, right? Okay. So anyways, they named their boat Lady Greely, and they were towing a whaleboat. So they had a whaleboat, they had a steam launch. Probably could have used that extra whaleboat, remember from earlier? Yeah. So pretty soon they were desperate because the ice kept stopping them, and it was like really slow going, and they didn't have a lot of supplies, but they also weren't on land, so they couldn't forage for anything. And so they were just kind of stuck. And also the water kept, like the ship was getting waterlogged. This is when I was talking about Cross just being blind drunk. Like at the helm, just water up to his waist, just yelling at everybody. And Gislingbur, or not Gislingbur, but Greely was like, "I'll kill you. I will straight up kill you." But Cross was like, "You can't kill me. I'm the only one who knows how to drive the boat." So pretty soon they were desperate as the ice kept stopping them up, and they had no food or real tents. Greely started living out of his sleeping bag, kind of, and just yelling at everyone. Cross got drunk on lamp fuel. All right, so this is when he started drinking lamp fuel.
Yeah, this is a dirty dog.
Yeah, and he fell off the launch and would have died if Sergeant Brainerd didn't jump in to save him. They all hated each other by this point and were furiously writing in their journals about how fucked up the whole situation was. This book, by the way, gets so far into all their personal disputes. It's amazing.
Oh, fun.
It really is great. When they made their way where supplies were supposed to be, they found just a few supplies and like they couldn't figure out why. So, they were fighting about that, and then Greely was quoted in Corporal Joseph Ellison's journal as threatening to kill Sergeant Cross, saying, "God damn your soul, come out where I can see you when I want you." And when Cross argued, Greely yelled, "Shut up or I'll put a bullet through you," to which Cross replied, "Do as you please."
Nah, fucking kill me.
So yeah, that was him being like, "You can't kill me." Greely then hid all the alcohol from Cross. So he just, there's no way he was going to actually keep it from him,
and
but he
then
was.
the lamp fuel.
Yeah, so that's kind of, the lamp fuel was probably became a big part of it. They found like small amounts of rations as they made their way south, but the ice kept slowing them down more and more, and Greely kept demoting the men to private. So it's like he just kept getting upset with people and being like, "Well, now you're a private, and now you're a private." It was just
and
pissing.
none of you can do the things I want.
Yeah, which was a crazy move because they're like trying to survive getting home, and he's telling them, "When you get home, you'll be demoted."
Yeah.
Basically.
That doesn't seem good for morale.
No, but, he even told Lockwood privately that he would seek mutiny charges against Octave Pavey, Kislingbury, and Sergeant Maurice McConnell, who he then made Private McConnell, which is, again, hilarious. At 5 p.m. on October 9th, 1883, they found the remains of the caches left by the Proteus, along with an 11-month-old report of the Proteus's sinking. So that was a bummer.
That was when we just found out about that?
Yeah. Greely decided to follow the advice that they gave him, and he headed to Cape Sabine, which was nearby. So when that sank, that was, like, at that point, they were like, just go to Cape Sabine. That's going to be the easiest place for us to get to, even though that didn't turn out to be true. So they built shelter out of ice-covered rocks with their bare hands and draped the enclosure with sailcloth and used the whaleboat as a roof. It was less of a hut than a tunnel, with hardly enough height to kneel in. An old copy of the Louisville Courier-Journal was found in the Proteus cache, and it quoted Henry Clay, that guy who got out of their party at the very because Dr. Octave Pavey had a problem with him.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so he was quoted, and he said that what had been left at Cape Sabine would not keep them alive and would only prolong their suffering a few days. So,
they're reading that?
Yeah. On October 20th,
How did that courier get there?
no, Henry Clay was back in the States.
But how did they find the Louisville Courier-Journal?
Oh, that was with the guys who were on the ship that sank. Greely predicted their rations would last until mid-March with strict limitations, right? So a few men left in search of nearby caches consisting of 4 boxes of meat, but in the process, Corporal Ellison's feet froze and had to be amputated.
Oh, no.
And it was his feet and his fingers. And the men were commenting their sleeping bags were frozen stiff, and that's really all they had. So the men's sleeping bags, so often used on the sledge trips from Fort Conger, were never more vital than now. The ones were, what was I writing? The better ones were made of tanned buffalo hide. A sheepskin variety collected moisture too readily and could turn into a mass of ice. Oh yeah, so that was it. Some of them were just chunks of ice at that point. Each bag could hold 2 to 3 occupants. Men sleeping singly suffered more than those crammed in one bag.
We want to be in a hot bag together.
Yeah. So the men started accusing each other of stealing food at this point.
Of course.
Ellison had his fingers and feet amputated, but he remained in good spirits to the surprise of the other men.
Good for him.
Yeah, this guy's around for the rest of this, by the way. This isn't one of the guys who dies. This guy's fine.
Okay.
And he's like, throughout the rest of the story, they're like, he seems pretty pumped. Like, he seems happy.
And that's, what's his name? Ellison.
Corporal Ellison.
Okay.
Yeah. So Dr. Pavey was busy caring for all the men, trying to survive himself. The week of Thanksgiving, he tended to Kislingbury, recovering from a rupture. Lynn had a
rupture?
I think anal.
He did anal?
Yeah, no, I think like they weren't able to shit at that point because they didn't have the strength.
Yeah,
so I think he like, Lynn had rheumatism and a weakened system from exposure and couldn't focus, so he just wasn't there anymore. Connell was dying of hunger. early, and Ellison was still recovering from his frozen extremities.
Chill though.
Yeah, but he's cool. He's fine. Rumors started circulating amongst the crazed men. Paranoia was high, and it was whispered that some men had been seen doing suspicious things. So they're all paranoid about each other because they're just starving. And Greely's favorite people were getting more food than others. That was the big conspiracy.
Some of the ones that kept their rank.
Yeah, they saved scraps for Christmas Day. So it's now 1884.
Okay.
Right? And they were like, we have enough for March.
And they've just been out of boat, like away from Fort Conger for how long?
This is September 1st right here. Yeah, so like they must have left in August.
Okay.
Right. So left in August, and then they had to go through the winter.
Okay.
And then they had to go through a whole nother year.
Down at this other Cape Sabine.
Yeah, they're just living under a boat at this point, eating.
Oh, jeez.
And there were different guys who were finding ways for them to stay alive. Some people were hunting. Brainerd was going and like getting shrimp, they called it shrimp. I think it was something gross, but it was like some kind of like, something you'd get from the shore. But he was making some kind of like stew out of it, and they were living off of that basically. Back in the U.S., there was a court of inquiry happening. That's what I was saying about the sinking of the Proteus relief ship.
Okay.
It became clear that all the men involved were inexperienced with Arctic navigation.
Yes.
General Hazen of the Signal Corps came under fire for inadequate planning. Because it was kind of his fault, even though it was like 100% Howgate's fault. But he just ran over, so he's gone. So it's like, somebody has to take the blame. And he didn't do great when it came to like getting them supplies, but there wasn't a lot he could do just because of the way like the ice. What are you gonna do? So back at Camp Clay in Cape Sabine, fever increased. Someone was stealing bacon and bread, and everyone's pointing fingers at each other.
How do they have bread?
Well, they still like as this was happening, they were just rationing further and further and further.
Okay.
So at this point, I'm saying they're starving because they're each getting like 2 ounces of bread a day and 12 ounces of meat a day.
Yeah.
So that's
not enough.
Yeah. Or at least
Especially
I think that's
in the cold.
Yeah. So Cross fell into a coma and died. The drunk.
The captain?
The drunk captain did. And Greely, like an asshole, blended on his alcoholism.
Yeah, I mean, you know?
He was like, if he wouldn't have been drinking lamp fluid this whole time, he probably would have lasted. So they didn't know what to do. They sewed his body up in coffee sacks and buried him in a shallow grave nearby. The men began to get into fights with nobody understanding what anyone else was talking about because they were just kind of going crazy.
Yeah.
Sergeant Rice and Jens Edwards set out to search for, boats or somebody to wave down. Rice, he left his will behind. Like he wrote a will and he left it behind just in case he didn't make it back.
That's fair.
And it was addressed to Kislingbury. And this is what I love. It included orders to destroy all of his papers, letters, and photographs.
Why?
And if that isn't the old-fashioned version of delete my Google history, I'm pretty sure he's like, I got some naughty photos in there, and I talked a lot of shit in my journal, and I don't want the other guys to read it. So Kislingbury was still mostly writing letters to his boys.
Dear boys.
Yeah. And so this is, I said the whole thing about they were having a shit time at this point. And March 1st, 1884 came, and the ice was still solid. The men tried to keep themselves busy, just doing all kinds of crazy shit. Like, it was all crazy at this point. And they were all writing about how scared they were about what was about to happen. And they were killing birds here and there. And Private Charles B. Henry was caught throwing up bacon that he had stolen. So they had a trial, but they were all too weak to really do anything. So they were just like, you stay in your sleeping bag, you fat piece of shit. and he had to stay in there.
And he threw it up?
Yeah, he like snuck in, snarfed it, and then he like threw it up into a bucket. And they're like, that's clearly bacon that you stole.
What a shit way to insult to injury.
Yeah, really, that's red-handed if I've ever heard of it. The thing that everyone's worried about that got stolen. Just barf up a diamond. And then April 4th, Fred Christensen, who was the native of Greenland, babbled deliriously, and then the next morning he died. Because I'm a scat man.
They just didn't understand it because it was What a way to go. Oh, no.
David Lynn died the following day.
Oh, it's picking up speed.
Nothing about that? Okay. They were so weak.
I feel like I hardly know David.
Yeah, David was barely in here.
Okay.
They were so weak that they were barely able to bury the men. They were just like throwing gravel over the bodies, basically. Lockwood died as well. Sergeant Rice and Thorlip Fred Christensen set out to find supplies, and Sergeant Rice lost consciousness and died on the way. And Christensen, who was like his best friend, buried him on an ice floe. Greely was.
Nice flow.
An ice floe is like.
Is that like a sheet?
It's like when the ocean is like freezing over, and the ice is kind of like it's together, but it's not. You know, it's like a chunk of that.
Okay.
I imagine. I think that's a good definition. Greely at the time was writing letters accusing Dr. Pavey of stealing food from his patients. Like he was like, "Oh, you guys are you're too weak," and he's stealing your food basically.
Yeah.
He's just trying to think of ways that this guy's a piece of shit because he hates him. But he was too weak to leave his sleeping bag, so he's basically just he's yelling out of his sleeping bag still. Sergeant Ellison seemed to be flourishing. That's the guy with the amputated fingers and feet. And at one point, the other men attached a spoon to his finger stumps.
That's so nice.
So he could spoon soup for
That's
himself.
so nice.
Yeah, and he was like apparently at this time like cracking jokes and having fun. It's like, who cares?
I already lost my fucking feet.
Yeah.
How's he getting around? Is he just hanging with his sleeping bag?
He's not moving. Like he needs the other guys to carry him around because
Okay.
he's stuck. Jens Edward tried to get a seal. So Jens Edward is the other native of Greenland. And he tried to get a seal on an ice floe, but his kayak sank.
Oh.
So specifically what happened was like he was going out to get the seal, and the seal was on an ice floe, and then some ice kind of popped up and hit him, and he like tried to jump out and threw his thing and jumped back in, and then apparently poked a hole in it with his gun, and then the whole thing sank.
Oh, man.
Yeah, so he's gone. And by the end of April, the 19 men lived off 2 ounces of bread and 12 ounces of meat per man. So that's what I was telling you. That's per day. At this point, 2 ships, the Fetus and the Bear, were leading the charge to save the Greely party. So this was Greely's wife and a couple of the other people associated
They're
with.
like, we gotta go get these guys.
Yeah, they're like,
It's
you
been
guys
how
kind
many
of
years?
forgot that they're up there, but they've
Yeah.
been there for 3 years, and we need to go help them. And then all the other ship captains in the area found out, and so everyone was kind of doing it because
Okay.
everyone wanted the fame of being the ones who
Rescuing
rescued them, right?
Yeah.
Meanwhile, the men at Camp Clay in Cape Sabine were writing their final letters.
Is it named after the guy that got kicked out?
Cape
Yeah.
Clay?
Camp Clay?
Or Camp Clay, yes it is, actually. Ellis died May 19th of starvation, then Sergeant Ralston, then
Wait,
Whistler,
Ellison?
then Sergeant, no, Ellison is fine. Ellison's
Chilling.
just scooping soup with his stump fingers. And then Sergeant Ralston, Whistler, Israel died on the 27th. Kislingbury died June 1st after begging Greely not to write poorly of him.
Too late.
And Greely, like, put up a fight.
Yeah.
He was like, I might talk some shit about you when you're gone. Corporal Nicholas Saller died June 3rd. Private Julius Frederick caught Private Henry stealing food again. Now he was doing it brazenly because he was like...
Brazenly.
Yeah, like...
Brazenly?
Brazenly. Is it brazenly?
I've only ever heard brazen.
Brazen, then. Who says brazen? I'm
Brazen.
just brazen, yeah.
Brazen.
That's how we've always said it.
Yes. Okay, so he was brazenly.
He's brazen. He's brazen because he's one of the stronger guys. Because he's been stealing food.
Private.
Yeah, Captain Barfies. He's the guy who
Oh,
threw
same
up.
guy, Mr. Bacon?
Yeah, no, old Biggie Bacon and stealing food. And they caught him again, and they found out he'd been like hiding food from them.
That's
like,
how he's staying so strong.
Yeah, exactly. So he wrote a letter condemning him to death, like an official, like, I guess that's what you did in the army back then, is you wrote a letter about why the guy had to die, and sent him to death. But they were all too weak, and that guy was the strongest, so they tricked him to Greely couldn't leave his bag, so Greely didn't know what happened. But they tricked him, they said they needed him, he walked out, and there was a couple gunshots, right?
Jeez.
And there's different accounts of what happened. Some of them say they did like the traditional, we all point guns, only one of us has a bullet, but we don't know who has the bullet type thing. But probably really what actually happened was just one of them did it and the others decided not to tell anybody what happened. Greely was not told how the man died. The next day, Private Bender and Dr. Pavey died. So Dr. Pavey finally kicked the bucket.
What?
and he killed himself with narcotics.
It's because they're all out of food. Is that why they're all dying?
Yeah. So they're starving to death, and Pavey was like, I'm just going to drug myself with this medicine.
Like pretty smart.
Yeah. So at this point, they were eating boots. Subsequent
Which they
medical.
did not have a lot of either.
No, they didn't have a lot of boots. They were eating like just strips of whatever they could get. They were still kind of scrounging. Like there's different levels of edible flora around that they were like, if we're really hard on, we can like eat this. But it was like
hard on.
Oh, you're right. That's a silly to say. Hard off, hard up. It's hard something. Anyways, if they got a hard on, they'll eat like weird shrub, but like they were having to use their fingers to dislodge the poops because their bodies just didn't have it was real rough. And then Hamden Gardner also died, and they were finally found on June 22nd with 7 of them left alive.
Wow.
The rescuers gathered the dead and shipped home, and they called them the funeral flotilla in the press.
Did Greely live?
Greely lived. Greely lived. In fact, they all made it back, and what happened when they rescued them, and this is the darkest part, is they found the bodies because they were going to take them all back with them.
Yeah.
And then they realized that they had obviously been cannibalized.
Oh.
Specifically, Kislingbury was like to the bone, and there was a few other guys, but all but one.
How recently had they died?
I think they were eaten like the most from how recently they died, basically. But Kislingbury was the one who was all eaten up, and then everyone else was at least a little bit eaten, except for.
Well, Bacon Man for sure. They're going after.
Yeah, for sure. No, it was like the one guy who was Jewish. Actually, they wouldn't eat him. So that was kind of cool. They I guess even in cannibalism, they kind of respected his.
Or they were deeply racist and anti-Semitic. Like, I'm not gonna eat a Jew.
Oh my God, yeah, that's probably what it was. Shit.
You think they were respecting his body?
Well, there was some things in there about like them trying to respect his different faith when they buried him, where like they said a different prayer because they tried to make sure they didn't say anything that would offend his faith because he was different from the rest of them.
Maybe they didn't need him so he could go to
maybe
Jewish afterlife.
Yeah. That's what I thought until you pointed out that it's probably not. It's probably the worst thing that could happen. So yeah, basically the ship picked them up. They saw everyone got ate up. Pavey, or not Pavey, because Pavey was dead. They don't know. We still don't know who did it. I have a couple. I think
who did what?
I think 8 people. I think probably the guy they shot. I think it played into why they shot him.
Bacon, etc.
Yeah, I think they didn't write it down, but I think they probably caught him eating other people, and that's why he had to get shot.
Yeah.
So I think it was definitely him, and I think it also might have been Dr. Pavey, just because it was like, someone's going to do it. It's probably going to be the guy who's the most comfortable with cutting up bodies, right?
Yeah.
Probably going to be the physician, maybe. I mean, that's just a guess.
Yeah.
And that would also make more sense of why.
Are they cooking them?
What?
Are they cooking it? Travis, were they just nibbling on it?
I can't tell you that. I can tell you the dude threw up raw bacon. So, I mean, they're not bringing it to the fire to be cooked.
Found it.
Yeah. This is a finger. This is a finger in here.
Oh, no.
Right. So then they were rescued. There was seven of these people left alive. By the way, reminding you, this was all Howgate's fault. This dude ran away. And here are the photos.
Of the survivors?
Yeah. So, so this is the original photo of everyone who left for the expedition. But a couple of these guys bailed really early, so they actually pasted the new guys' faces on down here.
Oh, funny.
Yeah.
So a ship showed up and we're like, okay, who's here? Who all here?
Yeah. That must have been creepy. And this is the man who rescued Greely, Winfield Scott Schley. That was the captain who got there. And the 6 survivors on the Fetus, which was the ship that Schley was in charge of.
Wow.
So Brainerd, Greely, Long, Frederick, Connell, and Beardbick are the survivors there, and you can see them. And that's Greely.
The after pic, huh?
That's Greely right after they. And this is him as chief signal officer. So pretty big come up. Yeah. So he made it. That's what he did. Is he eventually made it to the top. So he became the chief signal officer of the Signal Corps of the United States of America.
There we go.
Yeah, and then he would never talk about the cannibalism, but he was always kind of like sneaky leaking shit about, like just gossip every once in a while. He'd throw some gossip out there. But yeah, then those are that's the configuration of the where the hut was, and let's see, that's the funeral ground. That's the burial mound where they were buried.
Boy, oh boy.
Yeah. So that is the story of the Lady Franklin Bay Expedition, also known as the Greely Expedition. Happy Faded Folklore, everybody.
Wow, eat some candy.
Yeah,
Wait,
drink a beer.
Before you close it, I need you to close your eyes for a second. I want to do a little closing celebration.
Okay.
Okay. Don't ignore these sounds. It's just a misdirection.
Okay.
Okay, ignoring.
It's all ignored.
Okay, ignoring. Okay. Okay. All
Just
right.
gonna leave.
You can open them.
Ah! Oh my god. It's a Muppet. Where did that come from? The production quality on the show is amazing. If he wasn't green, this would be amazing. Because the green screen's definitely gonna ruin this.